Let's talk about the big news that broke last night. Kayla Harrison signing with the UFC and going to be fighting Holly Holm at UFC 300. And this is the exact type of fight that UFC 300 needed. Something out of the box, something we're not used to. But it does depend on one big thing, and I'm sure you can tell by the thumbnail of this video. It's if Kayla Harrison can make 135, and that's what we're going to talk about in today's video. And I'm also going to talk about, obviously, PFL's involvement in all this and sort of the bantamweight division as a whole. My name is James Lynch. Let's dig into this. So the big question here is, can Kayla Harrison make the weight? If you remember her Olympic career, she fought at 78 kilograms. I converted that to pounds. That's 171. And then in PFL, she's primarily fought at lightweight, so not even featherweight. She's fought at lightweight, meaning she's going to have to move down 2 weight classes just to fight Holly Holm in this spot. She did fight at featherweight, had like a one-off fight for Invicta. I don't know if people remember back in 2020. She did make the weight for featherweight. So that's going to be the big factor here, because if Kayla Harrison can make weight at 135, this is a much needed injection into the bantamweight division, especially after what we saw on Saturday between Raquel Pennington and Mayra Silva. Let's be honest, it was not a great fight. And the division outside of maybe Juliana Pena feels a bit stale since Amanda Nunes has left. So this is a really, really good matchup here to sort of put everything together. And I think it's also kind of a low-risk fight for Kayla to a certain degree. Now, look, Holly Holm's a former champion, but Holly Holm is also 42 years old. She's going to be 43 later this year. She's coming off, I guess, a no contest, but really a submission loss to Mayra Silva. I know Silva ended up getting busted by USADA for not disclosing her ADD medication. I don't think that was a huge factor in her losing by submission here to Holly Holm, but it'll be interesting. And Holm really hasn't been that active over the last couple of years. You look at it here, a couple fights in 2020, then didn't fight all the way till 2022. Fought twice last year. Will be fighting this year. Actually, her fighting, twice last year was pretty active for her over the last little bit. So we'll see how she looks in this fight. But I kind of put Holly Holm in kind of the same categories like an Aspen Ladd. Holly Holm's better, I think. But, again, it's going to be interesting to see if Kayla can adjust and how she'll look with cutting that much weight, because that's one of the reasons I think Kayla has been so successful, aside from her, Jujoku pedigree, is the fact that, she's pretty strong in there, right? So if you're going to cut that much weight, if you're going down 2 weight classes, that's certainly going to be really interesting. If you do a quick tail of the tape here, there is a big discrepancy here. You look 42 years old for Holm, like I mentioned. They're both 5'8", 69-inch reach to 66, so physically pretty similar, but you can see a big age gap there between the two, between Holly Holm and Kayla Harrison. But the real question is, and this is something that we sort of knew if Kayla ever did come over to the UFC, is how will that jump in opposition be? She just fought Aspen Ladd in her last fight, someone that was in the UFC, who, let's be honest here, was kind of like a 500 fighter and had a lot of issues making weight. Aspen had just a weird UFC career, right? Because the fights that she did make weight, she looked pretty good. And the fight she didn't, she obviously didn't look very good. But Harrison's fight against Aspen Ladd, it was a dominant win, but she didn't finish her, and that's something to me where, had she finished an Aspen Ladd, I might feel a little bit better about picking Kayla Harrison in this spot. Of course, she came off the loss to Larissa Pacheco, which kind of took away a lot of other things for Kayla, and that also forced her to take about a year off here. But look at this opposition here. Not great. A lot of just, and this is not PFL's fault, because there just aren't a lot of women bantamweights or featherweights or lightweights in this case outside of the UFC that they can match her up with. So they've done a good job of building Kayla up. She was sort of been a staple for PFL since they became PFL, right, from World Series of Fighting. So, this was sort of the natural progression of her coming over to the UFC and really seeing how good she is. She's been billed as one of the best women's fighters in the world. We'll see if that's the case fighting Holly Holm. As far as like an early pick on this one, and I will do a full breakdown before UFC 300 for early look, I am going to go Kayla Harrison here just slightly, just because of the activity level. And I just think a fighter that much younger and, you assume a little bit stronger will probably have some success here. But I'll tell you this, if Holly Holm is a huge underdog in this fight, I'm absolutely going to lay some money on this, because as we've seen many times when it comes to matchups, level of competition does matter. And Holm, if you look at who she's lost to, outside of Mayra Silva, right, which wasn't a very good fight for her, Ketlin Vieira was close, that realistically could have gone her way. She has a win over Aldana, who fought for the title. She has a win over the current champ, Raquel Pennington. She lost to Nunes, but who isn't losing to Nunes? And then she also lost to Cyborg. But these are all good opponents she's losing to. And even the Miesha Tate fight, where she dropped her title, that was a fight she was winning and ended up getting choked out late in the fight. So I think this is very intriguing, and I think the UFC did a good job with the matchmaking here, and I'm curious to see how Kayla looks cutting that much weight and fighting someone like Holly Holm, because realistically the UFC could have done her and Juliana Pena and done that, and that would have been a huge fight. You think of how much trash Juliana Pena talks and how much trash Kayla Harrison talks, that's a huge fight for the division. So, but the thing is, you put her in there against Juliana, what if it doesn't go so well? I think Holm is a better test, just because Holm, as we know, kind of on the tail of her career, so it kind of makes a lot of sense. But let's talk about the PFL side of this thing. We see here, supposedly she was able to join the UFC. She wasn't under contract. I had heard from some people behind the scenes that it seemed like Kayla, at least to, I think to sort of the general public, was still under contract with PFL, and it sounded like a fight with her and Chris Cyborg was going to happen here. This is a huge blow to PFL, to be honest here, especially they got that pay-per-view coming up in Saudi Arabia, or in the Middle East anyways. I believe it's Saudi Arabia, I can't remember. Yeah, I mean, that's a fight. Like, their women's division at this point is kind of dead, right? Like, you can't really build a division around Larissa Pacheco or Aspen Ladd or any of these fighters. If I'm PFL, I'm going all in on Dakota Devicha, who's their flyweight fighter. She's very marketable for a variety of reasons, and she's a pretty damn good fighter. She's 10-0. If I were PFL, I would go all in on their flyweight division and build that up and try and bring some of the fighters over. I mean, you've got some flyweight free agents as well that I'm sure they could bring over from the UFC too. So that would be my advice to PFL if they're looking to build a women's division, because there just isn't the talent for bantamweight or featherweight or lightweight out there that they could build on. But that's just a quick side note to this video. But back to this fight. Yeah, it'll be really interesting to see what happens here. I also wonder if the UFC considered bringing back 145 and just having some of the bantamweights move up. That might have actually been a better move here now that I'm thinking about it, because kind of like they did with Chris Cyborg, you could just have fighters move up and fight Kayla Harrison at 145. And then that way, for a fact, Kayla's going to be at her best, right? Because I don't know how she's going to look down 2 weight classes. Like, I'm trying to remember of a fighter that has moved down 2 weight classes and had similar success. We've seen fighters move down 1 weight class or another. Let me know in the comments. I'm drawing a blank right now, but I can't think of, other than obviously, Kenny Florian comes to mind when he fought at the Ultimate Fighter at middleweight, and then he's fought as low as featherweight. That was a bit of a different circumstance because they didn't have his weight class. But I do wonder if the UFC maybe made a mistake here, not putting Kayla at 145 and just having the 35ers moved up. But then I guess there's just not enough talent at 35 to make a 145 division. So it would kind of be this mismatch here. But look, I think this is a good move by the UFC. I think this is the type of fight they needed for 300. It's different. It's not something we expected. Like, I'll tell you, I talked to people behind the scenes. I didn't have any idea about this. I didn't even know Kayla Harrison was able to sign with the UFC. So kudos to the UFC for kind of keeping this under wraps. And this is a very, very big fight for the division. And again, we're looking at UFC 300 right now. I think this is a good addition. I mean, there'll be people who don't like this fight, and that's just those are the people that want to see, Nick Diaz fight Tony Ferguson on this card. I'm not one of those people, but you add that in here. I mean, most likely this will be on the prelims. It sounds like it is. This is a good addition, and this card's looking a little bit better. They still need to add a few more fights, but it's getting there. I've been pretty critical of this card and them running out of options, but the UFC continues to find different ways to surprise me, like they did with this matchup here. So again, I will be picking Kayla Harrison by decision. Again, 3-round fight too, so that will probably favor Kayla, you would think, in the sense that you're cutting all that weight. The cardio, in rounds 4 and 5 is probably going to be tougher if you're cutting so much weight here. But yeah, good addition to the card, and curious to see how this all pans out. And like I mentioned, I will be doing an early look preview on this fight. But yeah, just to reiterate, Kayla's never fought at 135, right? It's always been lightweight or featherweight. I mean, just the one fight at featherweight, lightweight, and then, like I said, for the Olympics, it was 78 kilograms. Her last fight technically was a catch weight of 150, but still, I mean, we're talking a lot of weight there for her to cut down to 135. So I want to know what you guys think in the comment section below. First, how surprised are you? Scale of 1 to 10. Let me know in the comments how surprised you are. I'll say I'm like an 8. I didn't know this was even a thing. So we'll go with that. Who do you think wins? Holly Holm or Kayla Harrison? And lastly, do you think Kayla makes the weight? She's got some time. This is January, so get into a good nutritionist, get on that treadmill, and see what happens. I'm sure she will make the weight, but it is a bit concerning just because, again, she's making her debut. There's a lot of expectation. She's been built up as this big star in PFL. Can she live up to that in the UFC? It'll be very interesting. And the last thing I'll mention, I forgot to, before we get out of here, will this bring Amanda Nunes back? I know there's been some talk of that. There was an interview she did over the weekend at UFC 297. I don't think she comes back. They used to train together. What's the incentive for Nunes to come back unless they're going to throw her a boatload of money? But I don't think Nunes comes back either. So that was the other one little tidbit that I wanted to mention. But, listen, imagine this. Holly Holm, or let's say Holly Holm and Harrison goes without a hitch, and they end up fighting at 135 and Harrison wins. I mean, you could put her in a title fight. I mean, you might not even need to do Raquel Pennington and Juliana Pena. Maybe you just do Pena and Kayla Harrison next, or maybe do Pena and Pennington and then the winner of that fight. I don't know. I just think at some point they got to do Juliana Pena and Kayla Harrison. That just seems like a fight, trash talk wise, that would sell very well. So I'm not sure what they would do there, but we'd have to figure it out. Anyways, like I said, follow me on Twitter, TikTok, Instagram, @Lynch on Sports. If there's any other topics that are going on in MMA right now, let me know in the comments if you want me to give my 2 cents on that. I'm James Lynch. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.